briefly for this this second session. We've a little bit of a change of emphasis now. You will remember that Costas thanked our sponsors for this event, and one of those sponsors is EasyPower, and we've agreed to give them a short slot to explain to you about net zero energy, which is, I am an expert on that on Friday evenings, but this is quite an interesting and serious business proposition. So I'm very pleased to introduce Nikolaos Savouris, the Vice President of Energy Power.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's of a great pleasure my participation in this forum. I want to thank the organizers of this forum, especially Dr. Iatrou and Ms. Iatrou, for this great honor they have given me. First of all, allow me to say a few words about my company. I'm an engineer and Vice President of EasyPower SA, a company that over 13 years we are investing in PV power plants. Our holistic approach in our investments, which meant that we were doing in-house the development, design, study and installation of our PV plants, has provided us with technical expertise in customized solar hybrid systems for on-grid and off-grid applications. We are holders of a patent from the Industrial Property Organization to design autonomous hybrid units for energy production based in ship containers. Our systems are already in use by NATO military forces, mainly for off-grid applications. In the last 2 years, based on the expertise we have in the design of solar hybrid units with very high standards, NATO, we offer our services to airports and large industries that consider the possibility of investing in reducing their energy costs and minimizing carbon footprint. But I will describe more about that later on. Despite COVID-19 short-term and mid-term effects, the aviation industry is committed to specific actions to protect the environment by investing, you know better than I do, in energy efficient infrastructures, minimizing energy footprint, upgrading to level +3 airport carbon accreditation, meeting environmental standards, and of course net zero energy. Therefore, my main aim today will be to provide you information on airports' primary system architecture towards 2030 and 2050 goals, environmental goals, while reducing at the same time the average energy cost per passenger, increasing airport profitability, energy supply resiliency, support nearby cities infrastructure and growth. Our system is going to be used in the transformation of the second largest military airport in Greece. It's the 115 Combat Wing, to become the first net zero energy airport and carbon emissions military airport in the world, as per US Air Force guidelines and accreditation process. This unique project that will follow NATO specifications is on the Greek island of Crete in Souda Airport. The specific military airport is in use from the US Air Force, which has permanent personnel and airplanes all year round, and also part of its infrastructures is in use by Chania International Airport, which is the 5th largest airport in Greece. The specific project is implemented with YEK Terna Group. It's the largest infrastructure and renewable energy group in Southeast Europe. The project, as you can understand, started with a number of studies that we have made at least 4 months ago by recording all the data needed in order to analyze them, and then with the above data we made several meetings with the Hellenic Armed Forces in order to say what will be the payback period for this project, what will be the main goal and how fast we will succeed on that. And it turned out that within the next 8 years is the payback period. There will be no other cost of electricity for the airport. Currently the annual cost, energy cost in the airport, including the fossil fuels and everything that they use, is 460,000 euro, and the whole project cost is 3.5 million euro. So the 8 years, we believe that we will meet it. Of course, in order to do that, that means that we make a lot of changes in the airport. I could just say a few things about them. External heat insulation, replacement of windows and door frames on all airport buildings that have a high environmental footprint, replacement of all diesel boilers, rooms for heating with heat pumps, replacement of all electric water heaters with solar heaters, replacement of all vehicles using fossil fuels and operating inside the airport with electric vehicles, but we also add a small number of tricycles, electric tricycles, installation of 15 DC charging points because you have to be able to charge your electric cars. We add 1.7 megawatt PV station, a large battery storage system using lithium-ion cells technology, grid forming inverters. Grid forming inverters, it's the way to create grid, internal grid, and we don't need the actual grid that comes from the island itself. So most of the time, the airport will operate from the power that produces internally, and at times, when there is cloudiness for consecutive days, we might need some power to take from the grid. This is something very important, and this is something that only, as I will explain later, is something that can happen only with the use of a battery storage system and not just PV. And of course, there is a very specially designed energy management system, as we call it, which is the key thing that controls the energy flow in all airports, in all the devices that consume a lot of energy, and takes decision between the PV, the battery, the grid when it is needed. It can be programmed, and of course it takes consideration of the weather forecast of the next days before it makes any decision of how the energy flow will move inside the airport. So we hope that by the beginning of 2021, this is a project that they try to do, and this is the correct way to go forward for sure. But there has to be a considerable amount of renewable energy sources used by the airport, and if it is possible, internally. So any decision regarding this type of technology has to meet the following aspects. Mature enough technology has to be to enhance stability to airport operations, not to use something new. Meet airport safety regulations, of course. Ability to use it within airport borders, this is a key thing. And widely used to have a low investment cost, allowing an energy production cost from the airport that will be smaller than the cost the airport already is paying for the electricity from the energy supplier. For us, and having seen the market the last 5 years, we believe that two technologies fulfill those important aspects, and this is solar with battery storage. Currently, it's battery storage using lithium-ion cells. Why? Because solar is used already, widely used. The prices have dropped more than 90% the last 10 years and keep on dropping. We expect another 60% by 2025, and at the same time, the battery storage systems, which were designed initially to be used by the utility scale power stations, now they're used for electric vehicles. That drops the prices even more, makes them even more stable as a product, is already being used in cars, will be used more, so it's not a challenge, it's not something completely new, it's already in cars. They have crash tests with those cars, they have crash tests with those batteries, it is safe to use them. So, I would like to list the number of benefits, advantages that those two technologies, when used together, can provide to the airports. Number one is minimization of grid transformation losses. This is something that it's not easy to calculate, but it does apply to all airports. Why? Because you have high voltage to medium voltage and vice versa sometimes. That is transformation losses that can exceed 14%. If your system is operating internally, you have no losses. The cable losses are minimal, are less than 1% in cases like that. Okay, so it's the best way to bring close the energy production with the energy consumption. Elimination of demand peak power cost, that is grid cost. actually when you know very well that when you exceed a peak power, you have extra charges that you see in your bill. Since you will have a battery storage system, you can program this system to take the demand with powers, therefore reduce that extra cost that the airports have to pay. Of course, another key thing, and we have made several calculations about it, and I can say to you that reduce energy cost, which is a key thing, is very important, since solar and battery prices have dropped substantially. In the South Europe, you can produce energy currently with less than 6 euro cents per kilowatt hour in the south of Europe, which now the electricity cost, the average electricity cost in Europe is more than 12 euro cents. Okay, so also you can cover a large part of the extra energy costs that EV charging will bring to airports by producing green energy at competitive prices for the EV owners. This is a big issue. This is a big, huge challenge. Why? Because it happened at the same time all of the world is trying to transform from fossil fuel power production to renewable energy sources, and at the same time they have made the decision to move on to electric vehicles, which means that the power needed to cover the already overpowered Earth, which needs constantly more power, has to exceed 30% by the next at least 5 years. So, but that at the end of the day is an extra cost for the airports, because the airports, as you can understand, has to have charging points. Everybody say that we need fast charging. How fast? 250 kilowatts for 15 minutes. 250 kilowatts. How many cars you would like to charge in one airport at the same time? 50. If it's 100, you will need 25 megawatt. Constantly be there to charge cars. Your cars, your visitor cars, the passenger cars, all that, for sure, it will increase the cost. The cost of energy will be increased. There's no way to be done otherwise, because the time that everybody decided to do both things, transformation to renewable energies and at the same time electric vehicles, it's very small. So it will lead the prices initially to go up. Of course, you will manage to reduce carbon footprint by using renewable energy sources. And another key thing is the resilience during blackouts. Since the airport itself will have its own grid, which is connected with the main grid whenever you want, when there is a huge blackout and you lose the grid, the battery storage system will act as a huge UPS with a response time in less than 10 milliseconds, less than the blink of an eye. You will take all the loads, not just the critical, but you can take all the loads, critical and non-critical of the whole airport, will be taken by the battery, so that nobody understands that there was a huge blackout in the rest of the country or in the city. Solar panels on rooftops of building hangars, parking spaces, provide heat insulation, sun and rain protection. And also, another thing is that by reducing energy supplied by the grid to the airport and by eliminating demand peak power, essential power resources will become available to grid operators, enabling them to redirect it for the development of the nearby cities and the country. Most notably is the ability to achieve net zero energy and reduce substantially carbon emissions as set by us in Europe, as long as airport geographical position and free surfaces to install solar panels is enough. Based on all the above, airport investments in solar plus battery storage systems can enhance airports with necessary abilities, which are becoming crucial in a sector that will play a key role in environmental protection. Finally, all that are not useful if it is not made easily and efficiently applicable. The Echevarne Group, with which we are already cooperating, already has ample experience in investments and airport constructions. Together we offer tailor-made proposals to airports, allowing the application of such solutions, as I described above, at either zero or minimum cost for the airport owner and operator, based on pay-as-you-save or lease schemes, allowing airports to reach their CO2 targets faster and without upfront investments. Thank you very much.
One question from me, and then I'll ask if there are any other questions. Is this scalable to a very large airport, or is there a natural size limit to how
No,
much?
it's scalable. It's scalable, but it has to do with the limitations that we have in the airport, how big it is. But you have to consider that you can start progressively. You don't have to change the whole airport at once. You can start progressively, as I said. For instance, now that you will have to have charging points for the electric cars, are you going to take from the grid, or you have the ability to use sun to charge them? It would be a good idea to start like that. Just an idea.
Okay. Are there any questions?
Sure.
It may be a good opportunity for Africa, no? We have a lot of sun.
I know. I have been studying Africa for many years now. I have a lot of things. I've been to Ghana, to Morocco, and there's a big opportunity definitely in Africa.
I know that last year in Mombasa Airport we were doing some solar energy at the airport.
Yeah, but yet again, nobody is investing in solar with battery.
Ah, okay.
Okay, now the price at the battery has dropped substantially to allow us to make a good, let's say, income from that and reduce the energy cost. But it all is down to the electric vehicles.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again for your sponsorship of this event, and also to Athens, of course. We now move on to the second panel of the day, addressing the same topics, but with a different moderator and a different panel. Eamon, our last moderator, was, as you know, very much a hands-on operational guy, and we're now switching to Professor Andreas Papatheodorou from the University of Aegean. Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So it's a great pleasure to be with you tonight. I know it's always a bit challenging to moderate a panel shortly before dinner, and especially on a Friday evening, but I'm sure we'll do our best. We have an excellent panel consisting of four well-known industry figures, so I would like to kindly invite them to take their seats. We have with us Rafael Echevarne, who is the Director General of ACI Latin American and Caribbean, Ilias Maragakis, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Fraport Greece, Andreas Schneider, who is the CEO of Geneva Airport, and Tassos Raftopoulos, who is the Director of Alliances and Aeropolitical Affairs for Aegean Airlines. So we've heard a lot today regarding the state of the industry, how things have evolved over the last few months. So obviously we're experiencing unprecedented circumstances. I was reading the news on the IATA website. According to the latest estimates, we expect to see a loss of about $84 billion for the entire 2020. That's for airlines. 7.5 million flights have already been cancelled between beginning of January until the end of July. And obviously, as we all understand, the demand for air transport is a derived one. Very few people fly for the sake of flying. I know Tassos is one of them, but not that many around. So most people fly to go somewhere and do something, and that's usually related to tourism. And here we should understand tourism as a wider concept, not only in terms of leisure, but also in terms of visiting friends and relatives, business tourism, of course, and health and other matters including. So what we've seen over the last few months is that the entire aviation and tourism ecosystem has suffered a lot. Obviously, airlines and airports have suffered. It's not only them, however, it's also the tourism participants such as the hotel accommodation. But even if we just take into the aviation system, we need to talk about the ground handlers, or even about car rental companies. I'm sure you've all heard of the bad news about Hertz, one of the most historical companies which ended up filing for Chapter 11 recently. So, first thing that I would like to ask our distinguished guest here, the Savouris panelists, is what do you think about the evolution so far in terms of the entire business aviation ecosystem? How do you see things evolving from now on, from a holistic point of view, but also from your specific sector? So, Rafael, shall we start with you?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the invite. I'm actually, as you said, I'm representing, I am the Director General of ACI Latin America and the Caribbean. And, you know, the situation in that part of the world is there. I mean, despite the fact that the COVID came at the, you know, it was the last geographic part of the world where it got to, it actually got there with a vengeance, in a way. In the sense that we not only have had a huge drop in March, but actually from then onwards, the activity has practically been zero. I mean, there are countries like Colombia, like Argentina, like Panama, where as of today, the number of commercial flights, both domestic and international, are zero. And, you know, I was just speaking with my board a moment ago, and one of them is from Argentina. And actually I was writing an article a few days ago saying that in the case of Argentina and Chile, okay, the winter tourism, of course, is nothing comparable to the Alps, but still it provides a lot of jobs to a lot of people in southern Argentina and Chile. This year it has been zero. All the ski resorts are shut down. Okay, so the situation is quite dire. Okay, the countries have tried to, who have actually managed to convince the authorities, and I can tell you one thing. I mean, in the situation of Colombia, which is probably the third largest country in the region, or fourth largest in terms of importance of air transportation, the airports and the airlines don't know what else to say to the government about the need to restart air transport. They've done pilot programs, they've done cleaning of the terminals, they've done cleanings, everything. And as of this day, they are still talking about doing some tests. Tests for what? You know, and at the same time, we have Mexico, the only country in the world that we are aware of where there were absolutely zero restrictions to aviation, both on domestic and international. So yes, I mean, the situation is dire. We are at this very moment trying to convince governments to restart the industry with whatever type of you know, checks they want to introduce, but please, no quarantines, because we have seen it here in Europe and everywhere around the world that I had a situation, this is absolutely true, with Minister of Tourism of Chile, where she was actually saying, well, but we have domestic tourism. You know, I mean, you don't know where to go when you hear those sort of things, okay? So I agree with one of the gentlemen who was speaking on the internet saying, you know, that there is a level of nonsense that is beyond belief. So yes, it's quite, I can't really tell you much more right now than to say that we want to restart flying. And that in the Caribbean, I mean, needless to say that all the islands in the Caribbean depend on aviation. And the situation is dead. So yeah, I mean, we want to restart as soon as possible. And how will we recover? Well, hopefully there will be some sense will prevail, you know, and we will allow people to introduce, you know, checks before flying and what have you, as you do here in Greece.
Thank you so much. Andrea, what's the European perspective?
Okay, perhaps compared to Latin America, we are like several months ahead. I will not go to the back, otherwise I will fall asleep. Anyhow, and we have clearly seen that the air traffic has started to take up again in June. And I think we have now some experience, and we see also the challenges coming up again, at least from our side. We see that reservations have started dropping. And one of the reasons is this totally uncoordinated approach about measures and so on. So I've taken your question which you've asked us, what we believe we need to recover from this COVID. Because we have done a first start, which wasn't too bad. I mean, we were at the beginning of August at over 1/3 of the passengers of last year. Now, one might say that's not much, but frankly, compared to nothing before, that's actually quite nice, and shows also that industry takes a long time to start. Even if you let it go again, it's not going to happen immediately. So first of all, and that has been said, but it's aligned measures. because it has the, I mean, one challenge really is that the people don't understand what's going on, and I will get then to the next one that's about confidence, but that really undermines confidence. And we have in Switzerland people saying now, you have so ununderstandable rules, we're not going to follow them anymore. So we're creating a real issue, and we probably need also to put that one in perspective about the risk. It is true we don't want to live a raise of the COVID crisis like we had in March, with a very high level of people in intensive care. But when you see now, we see a rise again of infections, but the rise of intensive care is almost inexisting. So one needs to keep in mind, and in Switzerland they have made a study about mortality. Now everyone who dies is one too many, but nevertheless, if you take the average of mortality of the first half year, that means 1st of January to the 30th of June, and you compare the last 5 years to this year, we actually have a lower mortality than the last 5 years. Now, I'm not saying we should not do something, but I think we need also, in aligned measures, have a better feeling about what is it really going to do, what is it going to help, and what it's going to cost. I think we have been too much in, we need to do something, and that brings me then to my last point, which is about being fact-based and not emotionally. The second one is we need to recreate confidence. There has been so many, I mean, we're all suffering from this fake news culture where everyone can say anything, and we have heard anything on those things. And it's really about having the right level of measures and also standing up for them. And secondly, to communicate about them. We have done multiple press conferences with our main airlines explaining what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing that. We had teams standing at the entry of our terminal, getting the passengers, explaining them, we want you to put a mask, we want you to do that. You need to explain people this new normal. Otherwise, they will be frightened because they don't understand it, they don't know what to do, why to do it. And they have heard everything and it's contrary. So I think that's very important. The third point is really agility. I mean, we had some incredible moments. I mean, we have quite some level of visit friends and relatives with different diasporas. One of them is Serbian. So Switzerland has declared very early on Serbia as a country of risk. So that really cuts you down. I mean, you lose almost 80% of the passengers, and then you start to stop flying. So the production goes down. Now, 3 weeks ago, Serbia moved out of the risk country. You know, we still haven't recovered most of the flights. So we need to learn. That's very difficult, and I understand for airlines it's probably even more difficult than for an airport, but we need to be agile. If we want to live with those everyday changing situations, and we want to maintain a minimum of demand to actually maintain flying, and get out of this kind of catch-22 situation where somewhere we would like to fly, but the situation is so unclear that people don't want to fly and they don't come, really need to do something about it. And I think another point really is, yes, today we're losing all massively money. Now, airports have one big disadvantage. They essentially don't get supported by states. At least in Switzerland, we don't get any money from the state. Now, we try to figure it out. So the way what you would do is you just cut massively costs. But we have to keep in mind that we're still in a process of recovery, and that we have to, yes, we need to limit our bleeding, that's clear, we can't just go, but we also have to make sure that if we limit too much our bleeding, that we will not become our worst enemy, not being able to recover when there's new traffic, because we haven't got the people anymore. And especially in our domain, where there's a lot of education to be done, security validations and stuff like that, you can't just lay off people and then take them back and lay them off and take them back. So I think that's very important. And my last point really what we need to get is to remind us each time, and also our governments, this is not about winning the next election. It's not about emotions. I mean, sometimes I get the impression a government is deciding something because they get pressure to decide something. But frankly, no one asks themselves why they're deciding it. So we need to go back to be fact-based, as we do also. We need to say, I mean, it might make sense to maintain a certain capacity, even if we don't fulfill it, because it gives us a bigger capacity to quickly recover, than actually just tear it down. So I think bringing all those things together, it makes management very complicated. I can tell you, we've had never less passengers at the moment, and I've never worked more than at the moment. I mean, I must admit, my biggest challenge today is avoid burnout of my teams, because we have been, I mean, we have to make sanitary plans and so on. You know, it's good. It raises a lot of questions which we probably should have thought about. And perhaps last point is we have to fight this crazy belief that globalization is bad, that we are the vector of this illness. I mean, we're living in a globalized world. So there will be infection of whatever kind. I mean, when we have a big crisis in a country, it will affect also other parts of the world. And it would be a big mistake to actually say, now we're doing everything in the country, we don't go anywhere anymore, we don't want to deal with anyone. And I listen to some governments, they start to say that. We want to produce our mouth mask in the country because we don't want to have to import them from China or another country. I think so. That's a little bit, there's no quick win. It's going to be a long haul, it's going to be very painful, very, how you say, difficult. But again, I think my most important point is, don't forget what is the end game. The end game is we will reach, perhaps not tomorrow, perhaps in 3-4 years, the level of 2019, and we have to be capable to do so. If we cripple ourselves beyond being able to do so, we will not get there at all.
Thank you so much. Tassos, you are the only representative of an airline on the panel, so what are your views on
well,
that?
there are only two airlines here in general, KLM and Aegean. So, you know, what has happened has been inconceivable. We have adapted since March, and we will adapt further. It's hard to talk about the future. I think the coming winter is going to be really difficult for all of us. We achieved around 50% of last year's activity in August, but looking forward, the bookings are low. About Aegean, we have applied the EASA ECDC protocol, and I think it has worked pretty well. We do struggle with different countries and different jurisdictions applying their own rules all of a sudden, and this has created volatility in the network and the schedule, and obviously this trickles down to the passengers as inconvenience and cancellations and rebookings, and it is unavoidable to a very great extent, unfortunately. We do our best. Our call centers and frontline staff have been in overdrive for months. Right now, we apply weekly testing for all flight crews. We also apply obligatory testing for anybody who's coming back from leave or from holidays. And unless there's a negative result, they're not allowed to work. And from the testing experience on the flight crews, we have had 0 infections of staff from flights. So it means that it is safe and it is working. The protocol has been effective in avoiding dispersal of the virus, at least on board the aircraft. As discussed earlier on by many of the colleagues here, the first thing we will have to deal with in the following months, and especially once there is a vaccine, is regaining traveler confidence. We will have to deal, I hope, next year only with the economic repercussions, recession and unemployment in the economies, and I hope that the medical situation will start to normalize. And we are optimistic that gradually things will be getting better as time goes by. One other comment I would like to make is that from this experience, it is clear that we are, from the industry, all in the same boat. And we need to cooperate the whole value chain very closely, starting from the manufacturers all the way to the airlines and the airports and the air service navigation providers. Without passengers, we are not an industry, so the passengers are primarily airline customers, indirectly airport customers as well. It is an opportunity to work closer and to cooperate and to understand this is very important. I also believe that to a great extent we have been let down by our regulators. There are various examples. I mean, the most obvious one right now is we still don't have a slot waiver for the coming winter season. Which I think is something pretty basic, and we have been expending energy and effort on securing a slot waiver for the COVID winter instead of dealing with more productive issues and trying to solve real problems. Another comment, there has been state aid in Europe and North America and in many other places around the world, but this is a patchwork. Not all airlines have received direct state aid. Aegean has not for the time being, not yet. And this calls into question the competitive situation, and it creates a distortion because there are cases in Europe where there will be what I would venture to call zombie airlines, which will survive exactly because of the state aid, and these airlines should not have been kept going. On the other hand, yes, state aid and the way is inevitable given the circumstances, but it needed probably to be managed in a different way. These would be my comments, and maybe I've been a bit too direct in some areas, but that's how we see it and how I understand it from our perspective in Greece and in Europe.
Thank you, Tassos. And coming to Ilias, we all know that Fraport Greece undertook a very ambitious investment plan regarding to improve the infrastructure over the last couple of years with great success. On the other hand, your airports are largely dependent on leisure tourism. How are you coping with this situation?
Okay, well, I want you to have two numbers in mind, 1986 and 60. And I'll explain what these numbers mean. So, first things, let me just explain about Fraport Greece. We're talking about 14 airports in Greece. These are the 14 biggest airports after Athens and Heraklion. 2019, we did 30 million passengers, so we surpassed 30 million passengers. What did we do in 2020? In 2020, actually, we were the busiest airport operator in Europe, by far surpassing the mothership called Frankfurt Airport, and many other airports that used to be in the list of the top 5, of the top 10, etc. Despite doing that, I think that's more, if you like, something that characterizes the situation of the European aviation market rather than Fraport Greece itself, but it also just shows you where the dynamism was in the market today. Why 1986? That number is actually where the traffic is now in Greece. It is exactly at the level that it used to be in 1986. So you can imagine asking me about the infrastructure, where we are having invested 2 billion euros in 2017 actually, and seeing now our investment flourishing and going back in time when it comes to traffic to that year of 1986. So that's one. That's, if you like, where we are. But, you know, we're a company of vision. I mean, airports are always looking forward, and what is done is done. And before I go actually to the future and what's ahead for what we believe for 2021, I'm just going to tell you what the operational reality is. We've had more than 85 different NOTAMs since the 1st of June. That is almost one NOTAM a day. I'll give you an example on driving here. Every NOTAM was affecting the way we're operating. On the way here, literally, I got a call from the minister telling me, you know what, do you have any other flights apart from Barcelona? No, I don't. Great, because in a few hours we're going to be canceling from Saturday Catalan flights and any flight from Barcelona. And that's it. Like 30 minutes ago, I received a text message, Barcelona is out. This is, I mean, now it's normal. But this is how we got to operate, and we still operate in the last few months. And this is no serious way of operating. Because what you see, if I were to show you a graph of the traffic, is that actually traffic was depending on exactly these notifications. So this is what was getting traffic up, traffic down. You want a PLF, traffic down. You open the market, traffic up. You're going again down because you need, for example, for some countries, to have a medical test. Well, now traffic is going down. So we had the example of the Netherlands, one of the best performing markets this summer. Immediately when the rule was made that you need a medical test, obviously this market literally disappeared within days. The biggest market right now in Greece is the UK. Just as an example of how traffic is depending on decisions that were not even considered possible merely a few months ago. So that's the number. Now, but let's look at the future, because for me, more important is, okay, what are we going to do in 2021? Because this cannot go on. And I believe, I mean, all the players around the table, they all want to see traffic materializing. What is really missing is facilitating travel in 2021. And what that means is, I don't know about vaccines, whether the vaccine will work, whether the vaccine will work for a few months, for a few days, will be a requirement or not a requirement within EU, outside of the EU. What we have seen is that what we need is a common platform where the standards that you have are easy to access. Very brief example. What was the requirement for the Dutch passengers? It was to have a medical exam. How can you check that medical exam when you arrive at the airport? It would be fantastic if you could do it just like with a boarding pass. So all you need to do is just to display this and just go ahead. So what I'm trying to say here is that in order to have and facilitate travel in the year 2021, because I believe COVID is with us for the next 5 years, we're going to live with this, whether there's vaccine or not doesn't matter. So it's part of the, I'm sorry to say, but part of the passenger experience. So it's now part of the passenger experience. So this needs to be facilitated. And with that in mind, I'm going to come to the second number that I mentioned to you, which is the 60. That's what I believe is going to be the traffic next year, at least for us, for the Greek leisure, like you said, airports. I believe the worst case scenario is that we're going to have a traffic of 60% of 2019. I would not be surprised if it is much higher than that. I have a lot of reasons to believe this. Of course, we can discuss it in private. I'm only going to highlight that I believe for 2021, many of the markets will be closed. Many of the long-haul markets will be closed or will not be so easily accessible for various reasons. So I do believe that the Mediterranean, and especially Greece, and especially these beautiful islands and this very beautiful country, will really benefit, and people from Europe will want to visit once more. So that's where I believe we are.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So let me now move on to a related topic, which is learning lessons from history. So if we go back to 2001, when we experienced the terrorist attacks, there were many analysts believing at the time that it would be the Armageddon, the end of the transport industry, and fortunately that was not the case. However, what was the case was that we had responses at different levels. So at a macro level, let's say, we had governments, and especially the American government, talking about the axis of evil and chasing terrorists around the world. Whereas when we talk about industry-specific measures, we saw, for example, that the FAA started by somehow guaranteeing that in case of another terrorist attack, they would cover part of the insurance costs. And this actually was a great help to the industry in order to see insurance premium going down. But then we had a number of other costs that were embedded into the cost structure of airlines, airports, and now it's part of the normality. So coming now to today's situation, we can say that the equivalent of chasing terrorists back in 2001 is chasing the solution to with a vaccine or to the cure of a disease. Talking about industry-specific measures, okay, a number of countries have subsidized in different ways. They provided state aid to airlines, but what about the other costs, those that are incurred by airports, for example? How can we embed all this into the cost structure? What's the role of the state, and what's the role of the other stakeholders in this case? So, Tassos, shall we start with you?
Yeah, my answer is going to be pretty short. It's not a cost problem, it's a revenue problem. Okay, this is the situation. So the problem is not the hygiene measures and the cost.
So you think it can be very easily
This is something we will deal
accommodated?
with the way we dealt with security in the past. In some way or another, we're already dealing with it. The problem is that there's no demand. And we have a cost base which is designed for a different level of demand, and we cannot reduce that cost base in a very short time frame. So unless there's an increase in demand.
But had you been given the opportunity, would you ask for a different aircraft seat configuration now, or would you install any special glass protections?
No. The experience to date, and as I mentioned previously, because of the testing we do at the flight crews, we haven't had a single infection in our cabin crew from flying millions of passengers. Even despite the reduction, the numbers are still huge. So I don't think that anything different is needed. There needs to be more stability in relation to the destinations, the quarantines, and as Ilias said, the NOTAMs that come, yes, more predictability, more homogeneity in between countries would help. Yeah, so this is what I can our experience.
I think, as was said, there is a part to it which is really related to the number of passengers we have to deal with. Because if you look at the costs we had, was essentially it's infrastructural adaptation. It means putting plexiglass screens in front of every desk, creating special lines to wait so you can have a minimum of distance and things like that. Now, luckily you don't need to do that every time, but what would help is to have a kind of common, I mean, if everyone asks for something else, it will become complicated. But clearly this cost had to be done in a place where we had almost no passengers, so this is just sunk cost. There was no way we could do anything about it. Then the next one is really all the extra cleaning you need to do, providing liquids to the passengers. Some airlines asked us to provide masks to the passengers and so on. Now, I think there you can find a way dealing with passengers that they do it themselves. I mean, it's becoming like the new normal. Huh? Like you put a jacket on when you go out when it's a little bit colder. They will have to have a mask if they go somewhere. But also there, it would be nice if we would have a common way. Latest example, you know, we have departures for France, which are looked at as a domestic flight, and we have departures for Switzerland and the rest of the world, which is looked at an international airport. You know, 3 weeks ago, France has decided they will not allow in a flight from France, a domestic French flight, or flights to France, the textile masks. It had to be a paper, you know, chirurgical mask. Frankly, while in Switzerland, we just had a week before a big campaign by our national health organization saying it is more ecological if you use textile masks. You know, that's the kind of things where actually for the passengers, it's just a nightmare. Then where we see the real costs is we clearly are advocating at the moment in Switzerland to use more testing instead of quarantine. Because that would, but who's going to pay for that? In Switzerland, the average cost of a test is approximately 100 Swiss francs. Now, compared to an average price for a European destination, which is essentially which is anywhere between 50 to 100 Swiss francs, that means it doubles the price. Now, who is going to pay for it? Naturally, airlines push that it is done, but they will certainly not pay for it, which I can understand. So we cannot pay for it because, I mean, our airport taxes would be 5 times more expensive. And so there are questions for those little bit more powerful tools, where frankly, I mean, we've seen it in Germany. It was covered by the German state. Now they have just some days ago decided to stop it because they can't do it anymore, and probably the price just goes through the roof. So that is a huge question. So I think, and that is going to be going into the debate whether we have to, on the long run, adapt the price of traveling to such extra costs. Now, when I remember, I was at the World Economic Forum when 9/11 happened, and I had the chance to travel almost every week, several times to New York, organizing the first annual meeting in New York. We didn't see huge price increases, but that was still the time where airplane tickets were very expensive. Now this world has changed. I mean, I remember we paid, I don't know, 1,000 Swiss francs at minimum for an economy ticket, transcontinental, or even more. Today we're much lower, and there is going to be a real, and in Europe it will be even more complicated. People are used to pay between 15 to 100 Swiss francs or euros, whatever it is. And many of those extra costs, which would be very efficient in creating a little bit more stability, are at the same price or even more than the ticket actually costs. And so that is for me the big challenge. Who is going to pick up this cost at the end of the day?
Well,
and
I can say that testing could be a commercial opportunity for some airlines or some way, depending on how you approach it and how you think of it.
I think it's certainly something to be thought about. But it is the challenge which we see in some airports which are offering that as a possible service. The moment, I mean, in Geneva you can at the moment test yourself at the university hospital for free. No one goes to those things. So this is there also again, we need a common approach. I think if everyone would be dealt the same way throughout whole Europe, for example, saying if you want to travel and you don't want to risk a quarantine, you pay the price which it is cost for a test, which might go down because we have much more tests, then there's no problem. But when you go in one country, it's the state who pays for it, in another country it's you who pay for it, the prices might be not the same and so on. That will not work. And so I come back for us. I think most of the costs, they were quite difficult to bear because we had to invest them while we had almost no passengers. So there were all sunk costs. But it was like a little bit the entry ticket to show to the passengers in our communication, we've taken it serious and we do all we need to do. But on the long run, there are the bigger cost items which will come up where we have to find a more, how you say, leveled way or similar way to different, and it will become even more important for intercontinental flights. I mean, I just had 2 days ago a discussion with the head of operations of Swiss, and he said their biggest problem is to know what kind of rules their cabin crews and their pilots have to follow according to which country they go, and they change all the time. And that is, this, I mean, luckily we don't have to deal with that, but I just don't want even to imagine how that is. And I all recommend you, there is a site from the EU on the rules of each European country to COVID. I invite you to look at that one. That has given me such a depression, I actually... No, you
Totally
just,
fragmented approach.
this is like everyone has thrown the dice to say, what can I do different than my neighbor?
Ilya, what do you think?
About the costs? Well, two things. First of all, okay, I mean, 2020 was an abysmal year. We lost almost 200 million, so obviously, like everybody else, we're bleeding. But there's a problem with airports. They're a fixed base, or if you like, sorry, excuse me, a fixed cost operation. That's what we are. Okay, I mean, of course, we have the marginal cost, but at the end of the day, that's what an airport is. So it means you cannot really adjust your costs that quickly based on the traffic, just to get back to your point. If an airline has an issue, like Tassos mentioned, imagine what happens with an airport, which is, that's it. I mean, actually, either it's on or off. Air conditioning is on or off. You cannot say, I'm just going to have it on once I reach 1 million passengers. So that's one aspect of the cost. I think there is another element when it comes at least to the airports, which might not affect, of course, the airlines. It has to do with concession agreements. So imagine any investment, any risk assessment that you do, if we were all bankers, and somebody would say, okay, this is my business model, and somebody around the table would ask the question, so what happens if there's a pandemic? Yeah. It's just going to blow it to pieces, right? So this is the other element, which is I believe that's going to be the negative legacy of the pandemic when it comes to investments, concession agreements. How do you make a concession agreement being workable, even in the most difficult of circumstances? So if you like, there is the issue of cost, which of course is here today, and we try to cost the measures, but I think it's more the impact that these changes have when it comes to managing it, like flight prohibition, etc., etc., etc. And I think more important is the long-term cost when it comes to investments, and airports, don't forget, are long-term investments. There are projects that require you to make business plans for 10, 20, 25 years. So that is something that we need to have in mind.
Thank you. And Rafael, you represent an organization, so if you can also talk about this fragmented approach and what is
Yeah,
the
well,
role of an
first of all, to
organization?
say that indeed those costs that you were referring to in Geneva, I mean, and also the cost of PCR, I mean, we as an association, and actually I add, I think it's the same, shouldn't be borne by the airlines or the airport, should be borne by someone else, hopefully the state, you know. But anyway, the cost of the...
You might have troubles convincing the state.
Well, I know, but you know, you have to pass it on to someone else.
No, I agree.
But I mean, actually, the cost that you were referring to, actually, if you were to buy them by the passengers, I mean, at the end of the day, is not that large. The important ones are, of course, the tests of the PCR tests and so on. Okay, that's one thing. The biggest disappointment for me in this whole situation was in relation to the varied approaches that each single country and even each single region in some parts of the world are taking. It is unbelievable. I mean, I remember clearly having the first conversations with ICAO, okay, in March, when this was striking around the world, and we were all saying, let's try to avoid what happened with 9/11. Let's not go each in the different direction. And guess what happened? Even worse, I would say. Even worse. I mean, it's unbelievable. Okay, big positive, at least for the part of the world that I work in Latin America. This is the great opportunity for technology. Okay, many countries in Latin America have been extremely hesitant in introducing technology, like for example, facial recognition for passport control on arrival. Okay, why have they been hesitant? In order to protect jobs. Okay, or because of the pressure from the unions, you know, in the customs and immigration services. Okay, now if there is a time, it's now. Okay, to do that, and actually that could have not only a positive impact on the experience for the passenger in arriving into a country, but actually for reducing costs, operating costs for the airports, operating costs for the country, and what have you.
And what's the role of organizations like yours in this
Well,
context?
we actually, I mean, it was mentioned by Luis Felipe before. One of the things that we have done is we have launched the Airport Health Accreditation, which is actually a way of actually ensuring or demonstrating to the governments that indeed the airports have applied the CART recommendations clearly. Interestingly enough, both CART recommendations, the EASA recommendations, they are straightforward. There is nothing extraordinary about them, okay? Really, the problem is the governments when they go and start building on top of that. So basically what we have said is, okay, let's demonstrate that the airports have done their bit, okay, with the ICAO logo attached to it. And, you know, hopefully that will demonstrate to the governments that things have done. The challenge, of course, as I was saying before, is there comes a point where you say, what else do I have to say to the government? I mean, what else do I have to demonstrate to you, like in Colombia?
Final question, talking about opportunities, you mentioned about technology, and I think that Tassos also briefly mentioned. So what about any potential new sources for ancillary revenue from an airline point of view, non-aeronautical revenue from an airport point of view? Are there any opportunities emerging out of this strategy? Leah, what do you think?
Okay, I'm going to start with one opportunity. This is true fact. You learn how to cut costs. Even as an airport, you really learn how to, this pandemic really allowed the airports, maybe here I need to do an introduction first because some of you might not be familiar with the Greek landscape. Regional airports are also very close to the heart of regional communities. So sometimes closing down an airport, let's say, would show the wrong message or would give the wrong message to many of the local communities, thinking that you're really shutting down the infrastructure. Well, you were not doing that. You were simply shutting down the air conditioning because there was no flight coming in. So if you were to restrict the operating hours of the airport, once upon a time, that was BC, before COVID, you will be accused like you're undermining the future of the island, etc., etc. I'm always talking about wintertime, obviously. While now, it was a very well accepted fact that, you know what, yes, you don't have any flights, you can shut it down. And this, if you like, is one of the great opportunities of really looking at airports like the way they are. They're an infrastructure, there's an environmental aspect here which you need to really take care of, not consuming a lot of energy, etc., etc. Things that were quite politically sensitive when they shouldn't have been. You know, it was, now it's a business. Now it's a business with a very clear instruction to serve the local community in the best way possible. So that's what it's all about. So that's one opportunity. Otherwise, non-ancillary revenues, I think, and here I speak, I think, for all the airports who are not here, the amount of money airports have lost from non-ancillary revenues like food and beverage, or non-aviation or non-aeronautical, if you like, food and beverage and so on, is so immense that no antiseptic liquid and mask will compensate for that.
Yeah.
Rafael?
No, I mean, totally agree with what you were saying. Actually, one of the measures that I forgot to mention before, as an association, we've been actually calling on governments in order how to deal with this. Okay, we are realistic in some parts of the world, like in Latin America. We know that there is no money, okay? As simple as that. I mean, the governors are going to give you money. So what have we been asking? We've been asking, for example, to extend the concessions, if possible, to make up for the loss in passengers. We've actually asked for the possibility of delay infrastructure requirements that were not necessary immediately. Okay, we've also asked for lowering the service level standards. Okay, that, as you very well know, I mean, are part of the concession agreement. Okay, so that's the sort of thing that we believe can have a very important impact and effect and positive for the airports and the industries as a whole. You know, and it is at the disposal of the governments. They just have to do it. Unfortunately, there is only one country in Latin America that has done something along those lines. Has been Brazil, by saying we will allow you to pay the concession fees, you know, at the end of the year, rather than on a quarterly basis.
Thank you. Tassos?
Ancillary revenues. You could sell insurance. Some are providing it, some the Gulf carriers are providing it for free, but and you could sell testing or bundle testing somehow with your, if that's going, you know, business class tickets or long haul tickets, potentially you could afford to bundle testing then. Just as thoughts.
Can this compensate for income loss?
For, well, testing in particular can help establishing confidence, but it is not necessarily applicable on all kinds of flights. I mean, for a domestic Greece flight, if you consider testing, it's not practical. But if you're talking about long haul, maybe it is. It's a different situation, and the revenues and the yields are different where you could probably include it.
Thank you. Okay.
First of all, to be clear, for an airport, and I totally agree with you, there is no way we can recover. For us, 2020 is down the drain. We'll have to eat the loss, and we have to deal with it. 2021, we hope we can at least reduce the loss, but we're probably also going to need. But what I see is, and we can win not in a monetary way, but in a how you say, in a positioning way, showing that we actually have standards on how to deal with such a situation, that we're actually at the forefront dealing with it. We really have measures which you cannot find in all the shops in the town, nor in the public transport system like the buses and so on. And so I think what we can really take out of that one is give it another push on what we offer as a positive experience, which is also protecting our passengers, and frankly building on top of that one, because I strongly believe this will create confidence, which will create demand over time. So somewhere, the only thing that's the only thing where we can win is actually facilitate the regain of demand. And I believe today the most important measure is creating confidence, and that one we can do through this certification program, which I totally agree. I mean, we're just doing it at the moment. We have to write 2 more documents, but for the rest, it's what we do anyhow, so yes. It's good. But also I can only recommend to other airports, publicize about that one, all the measures we've taken. Show them how we have worked on the passenger experience, how we do the protecting, like some airlines did on the filtering of air in the airplanes, which makes it even less dangerous and so on. I think when I see what is done in our country, which is a good country for public transport, but how it works in public transport, they are ages behind us. And I think there we can really exploit something which will help build confidence and will hopefully help gain again that there are more passengers, as long as the countries stop doing 85 knockdowns, was it, over the last 3 months? Or we having a new country popping up as a risk country, and especially the countries which are really interesting for travel every 2 weeks. And we have even the problem, some countries have started to do that to regions. In Switzerland, our government has decided we will not treat with regions. If there's a region with one country, in one country, even a small one, which is not acceptable for us, it's the whole country. So we have to get governments to get their act together and stop acting like beheaded chickens, to put it this way.
Exactly. So just because civil aviation is a global connector, as we know, the pandemic is a global problem, we also need a global solution, not just a very fragmented approach as we've seen so far. And again, we need to remember that we're talking about the people's industry. Hence the message is to build confidence bank and put passengers at the very heart of what we're doing. So I think that we can conclude our session here. I would like to warmly thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff, what do you think?
Yep. Okay. I suggest you go and sit down, gentlemen. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Andreas and his panel. It's my privilege now to try and summarise what we've heard today. Quite a difficult task, I think you'll understand, but also where does this take us as leaders of the aviation industry? I think my reflection on what we've heard today is that we're really good at articulating the problem, and we know what we would like to see, but I haven't heard anybody today really suggest what the solutions might be. I mean, what have we heard? Well, we know that the industry has been devastated, and certainly from my perspective, from the broader travel and tourism industry, we know that it provides last year it provided 330 million jobs globally, and our assessment now is that more than 200 million of those will be lost unless something changes very, very quickly. So we know how important we are. We know how bad the situation is. I think that's been articulated quite well. We've also, I think, had a very good exposure from the different speakers, the keynote speakers, and the panelists on their own experiences and their own feelings. One of the things that I detected was a sense, still, despite all of this nonsense, there's still optimism amongst virtually everybody here that things will get back to a new normal. Won't be the same, but it will be a new normal. We can grow back, but it's probably going to take us quite a while. But alongside that optimism, I think I also detected a hell of a lot of frustration, in the sense that as an industry, we're probably doing as much as we can that is within our own gift. And if you look at a lot of the new processes and procedures that are in place, the industry's actually achieved quite a lot. When you think that COVID-19 is actually relatively new, it's only been with us 6 months, and we've already adapted and used the word agility that was there before. But the frustration is that the things that we need to change are not within our gift. It's all of the, I'm going to be government bashing here at the moment, and I hate government bashing, but actually, when you look at all of the things that we know need to be fixed, they are within the remit of governments. It's consistency of medical advice. that would allow consistency of processes, consistency of testing of what happens to people as they're moving and travelling around the world. It's governments that need to put in place the international frameworks that are necessary for a global industry like ours. And we can only operate internationally. I mean, the examples that Peter was giving and others about, flying to 80 different countries and 80 different sets of rules. How do cabin staff know how to do those things? Well, we can feel sorry for ourselves, but actually it's the traveller who also experiences that, and we know that the one thing that's going to regenerate this industry is getting confidence back in the traveller. The traveller, first of all, can be assured that they're safe, and we can do that. We know we can do that. But the experience for the traveller is horrendous at the moment. And you just the mention of the European, Andre mentioned the European Commission website. It's horrendous when you actually look at all of every state is almost deliberately doing something different to everybody else. And we know the damaging effect that these announcements are having, with new restrictions coming in, new travel bans and so on, and quarantine. Quarantine is a nonsense and a killer. But all of that is kind of, it's out there. It's not something that we can influence, or is it? Because isn't that why we're here? Isn't that why we're trying to do something about this? The only suggestion that I think came out very clearly a few times was that we should actually be communicating what we are doing and getting across to the traveller and others, including governments, that we need to act, that aviation is safe in this COVID-19 context. I think it's quite a compelling story that actually nobody has yet caught COVID-19 while through international travel, and that's got to counter the previous accusations that aviation was part of spreading COVID-19 around the world in the first place. So what is the answer? From the World Travel and Tourism Council, we believe, and I think it's come through today, that quite frankly there's a lack of leadership. A lack of leadership, and one of the things that we've been doing is challenging individual governments and governments collectively on that issue. I think we can all point to our own governments or the governments that we know and say, who's actually running this? Is the health minister running aviation now? Well, what's happening? And we can see a complete lack of leadership and coordination within individual governments. But the problem that we've got is there's a complete and utter lack of cooperation between governments at the international level. And we've written to 10 heads of states and the leaders of the opposition to make this point, to try and push them, say somebody needs to step up. We've actually used the expression, who's actually running the world today? Who's actually running the world in this COVID-19 environment? And that's something that I think we can probably do a better job of collectively. I think we've got that we've got this joint frustration that all of these things need to change. We need consistent frameworks, we need consistent decisions, we need to get travel and tourism and aviation and everything else back up and running and all of those jobs. But right now it appears to be somebody else's problem. And I'm not quite sure what the solution is, but I believe as an industry we've got to be smarter on our messaging and our advocacy and pushing for this leadership. Even our dear friend Savouris left, but frankly, the ICAO CART process is good in as far as it goes, but it's only a set of recommendations to states. There's no teeth, there's no leadership there at all. It's just a recommendation. And if we want to move forward in the way that our optimism suggests we've got, then somewhere along the line we've got to find our champion. We've got to find a way of instilling leadership back into governments. And that's a big challenge. I think that's probably my summary of today. As I say, I think we've been really articulate on the problem, and we've been really articulate on what needs to happen, but nobody's really got the magic dust on how to do it, apart from making governments face up to their, not just their individual responsibilities, but their collective global responsibilities. So I leave you with that food for thought, because I know you've got thought for food right now. And so thank you, everybody, for today. Thank you just for being here. I think that in itself, as we mentioned earlier, is significant. Thank you for your personal investment and commitment in coming to this event. Poor old Kostas has been worrying silly over the last few weeks as to how many people would actually come or could come, but I think it's been a successful event. So first of all, thank you all for coming. Secondly, thank you for all of the people that have spoken today, in either as moderators, keynote speakers, or panelists. Congratulations to the award winners once again. I think we've got an outstanding set of award winners who thoroughly deserve the recognition that we've attempted to give them today. And well done to all of you. And finally, Kostas. I think we all owe you a huge thank you for being the organizer of this event, but more specifically for the outstanding friendship and commitment you've shown to all of us, not just the Hermes organization but to us, but also the hospitality. And when I said finally Kostas, that's not really true, because it's Kostas and Eugenie. You've welcomed us once again to your home. We really appreciate that. I know I speak on behalf of everybody when I say thank you for organising this. It's always an outstanding event, and for some reason you've even got control over the weather. So thank you, Kostas and Eugenie. And enjoy the evening.
Yeah. Food will be served in a few minutes, then you go for drinks, and then